Now, after we analyzed the overview screen, we can now proceed to the diagnostics AIDA screen. The most logical order would be to work from the summary screen through the other tabs shown here. Here we see summarized data from the last 6 months, the heart rate, the ventricular pacing burden, which is low. Also today, the patient shows preserved atrioventricular conduction. Below, we see that there have been no ventricular or atrial arrhythmias. Using these arrows on the right, we can go into more details. We have now arrived in the next tab. Here, we see the 24 hours heart rate curve. We can see that the patient is primarily paced. The blue curve indicates pacing in the atrium, regardless of pacing or sensing in the ventricle. Using the scroll bar here, we have access to the 7 preceding days. Here, 1 day before interrogation, here heart rate from 2 days before, and at 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We observe that the patient has had an episode of maximal tracking, which corresponded to a cycling exercise. We note that perhaps the rate modulation has been a bit too aggressive. We don't see this plateau during the other days of the week. We also do not observe other peaks which may indicate the occurrence of a tachycardia. The next button shows the collected sensing data. The R-wave amplitude histogram collected during 2 months, the R-waves detected in the VT zone, and the R-waves detected in the VF zone. We observe that all ventricular events are sensed at high amplitude away from the programmed sensitivity. At 8 millivolts, superior of 3.2 millivolts and 3.2 millivolts here. The same for the atrium, during sinus rhythm and during Modeswitch, which shows 0 sensed events since the patient had no AF during the last 2 months. In the statistics screen, we see a summary of data with of particular interest, a single episode of pacemaker-mediated tachycardia. When we look into the details and go to the bottom, we can see that there have not been many PVCs. We also observe that the patient has remained in SAFAR mode. Importantly, we also observe that the device has not registered any noise on the RV lead. So the lead is in good condition, based on these observations of the last 2 years. Here we see the sensing and impedance curves of the 2 leads, atrial and ventricular, the battery curve and the RV coil continuity trend, which are both normal. The ICD functions very nicely in terms of detection, so it will be able to show us if any episode occurred on the next screen. We observe that the device has only detected episodes of the type SVT-ST, with the date, hour, duration of the episode. The device has also recorded 3 mode switch episodes. They are rare events, as they occur once every year. If we look at the SVT-ST episodes, we see that they correspond to exercise. We see a progressive rise of heart rate within the tachycardia zone, so this is no ventricular arrhythmia. The same here, where we see a progressive increase of the heart rate. Here, the same. Again, here. The same observation here. It is important to look at all recorded episodes to not miss anything abnormal. we confirm that there are no abnormalities or errors in diagnosis. The same for the Modeswitch episodes. We see that the ventricular rate is relatively slow, and the atrial events show a train track pattern. When we open the EGM, we see that it is an atrial tachycardia with intermittent conduction towards the ventricles. And we observe that there are two groups of atrial sensed events. One, the actual sensed fast atrial events, and two, the longer intervals caused by functional undersensing of the prior atrial cycle. This explains the train track pattern on the tachygram. The same for the next Modeswitch, an atrial tachycardia with a cycle length of 300 milliseconds, 200 beats per minute. The same in 2019, and the final episode of the list, which is another SVT-ST episode during exercise. So there have been no ventricular arrhythmias, only a few atrial arrhythmias in an anticoagulated patient. Anticoagulated due to the fact that he has a high risk profile and the episodes have a duration of at least 1 hour. The last tab concerns AV conduction, with here the list of the AV block episodes, with their date and hour. In this example, we observe a Wenkebeck phenomenon with progressive PR prolongation until a blocked P wave. Since there are 3 blocked P waves in a window of 12, the device will switch to DDD. Here we see other episodes with the Wenkebeck phenomenon. Same here, but labeled AVB3 since it registered 2 consecutive blocked Ps, the second actually being functionally undersensed. Here a AVB1 episode, where indeed the PR interval exceeds the programmed limit. Finally, an episode labeled pause because of a PVC and a functionally undersensed ventricular event within the blanking post-atrial pacing. No detection for over 2 seconds, so for the device it's a pause. In conclusion, the device function is normal. The only suggestion was to change the sensitivity of the rate response, which is too sensitive since during cycling he was permanently at maximal frequency and he remarked frequent palpitations during exercise. We will not change the basic rate or max rate, which can modify the steepness of rate adaptation. Rather, we go to rate response and change the physical activity from very low to medium. Because very low means that the slightest change in exercise will trigger the rate response. While for medium, the acceleration will be less aggressive. When programming very high, the acceleration will be slow. So we will program medium and evaluate his symptoms during the next interrogation. We will not change any other parameter.